Big news last night out of Washington after nearly a year and a half of on and off negotiations. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia says he's reached a deal with party leaders to pass a number of Democratic agenda items through the reconciliation process, 50 votes. In a statement yesterday, Manchin wrote this bill will cut the inflation taxes Americans are paying, lower the cost of health insurance and prescription drugs, and ensure our country invests in the energy security and climate change solutions we need to remain a global superpower through innovation rather than elimination. Meanwhile, the Senate yesterday also passing a sweeping package to boost U.S. computer chip production to stay competitive with China. 17 Republicans joined all Democratic voting members to pass the bill. However, Republican leaders in the Senate now are urging House members to vote against that bill in retaliation for the Manchin-Schumer deal on reconciliation that came after. Joining us now, White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield. Kate, good morning. Good to have you with us. So let's begin with that reconciliation deal that surprised a lot of people in Washington. I know that Senator Manchin has been a thorn in your side in many ways as you try to get some of this stuff through. It appears now he's ready to make that deal with Chuck Schumer. How did it come to be? What role did the president have in making it happen?
Well, the president is incredibly encouraged by what we saw last night, by the contours of this deal. It is truly historic. It is a massive step forward in our fight to tackle the climate crisis. It's going to bring down health care costs for families all across the country. It's going to tackle inflation. It's going to reduce the deficit. And it's going to make corporations pay their fair share of taxes, all while ensuring that no one making under $400,000 a year sees a tax increase. So he is incredibly gratified by it. It's an enormous down payment on many of the things that he campaigned on. And he's grateful to Senator Schumer, to Senator Manchin, and to everybody who put in hard work over the course of many months to get to this deal. So it's incredibly important, and we're hopeful the Congress will move quickly to get it done because American families are waiting to see it happen.
Not all Democrats on board just yet. Bernie Sanders, Kyrsten Sinema, others say, look, we haven't really even read the text of the bill yet. Senator Sinema, for example, not a part of these negotiations, has objected to some of the things like the carried interest tax previously. Are you confident you'll get every Democrat on board to get this through on reconciliation?
Well, look, obviously, I don't speak for any members of the Senate or any members of the House, but, what I can say is that we're incredibly encouraged by what we saw last night, the general reaction. I think there's a lot of excitement from Democrats in both chambers about the contours of this package, and there should be. It is enormously impactful for American families. It's exactly the action they've been waiting for. It is going to ensure, for example, that we can meet the president's commitments on climate, which is something he campaigned on. You remember he talked during the campaign about climate as an existential crisis, an existential threat. And this package is going to take an enormous step forward to ensuring that we can meet the goals that are going to reverse some of the worst effects of climate change. So there is a tremendous amount here for that certainly American families would be excited about. And we're hopeful the Congress is going to move quickly to get it passed.
Kate, you've heard already some Republicans saying this is the opposite of anti-inflation, to add taxes and a whole bunch of new spending at a time when inflation is at a 40-year high is not what this economy needs. What's your response to that?
Absolutely not. This package is going to reduce the deficit. It's going to add to, we've already reduced the deficit $1.7 trillion last year. This is going to continue to do that. It's also going to bring down costs for American families. I mean, this is the number one thing that we see people are concerned about, are costs. This is going to bring down health care costs, which are a significant piece of a family's budget. It's going to help lower energy costs. I mean, these are the things that American families are relying on every day. This is tangible work that's going to ensure that they're paying less for these critical things. So no, this is a package that's going to help tackle inflation. It's right there in the name, and it's going to have a real impact on family budgets across the country.
Kate, Katty Kay here. While we have you, can we ask you the latest on the negotiations with Russia over Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan? Secretary of State Blinken yesterday said that the offer was made a few weeks ago to have some kind of exchange, which has been reported as exchanging Victor Bout, the arms dealer who's known as the Merchant of Death, for these two Americans. What's the hold-up on the Russian side? If this offer was made a few weeks ago, a substantial offer, as the Secretary said, was made a few weeks ago, why aren't the Russians responding to it? If they really want a prisoner like Victor Bout back, why haven't they responded? What's the delay?
Well, obviously, I can't speak to the specifics of these negotiations in order to help ensure their success. I mean, these are conversations that necessarily happen in private. You know, you obviously heard Secretary Blinken say yesterday we put a very significant offer on the table for Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan. And we've shown that we are willing to take extraordinary measures to get those who are wrongfully detained home. You saw it in the Trevor Reed case. You know, and the other thing I can say about this, you know, is the president personally has been deeply engaged. And he spoke with Cherelle Griner a few weeks ago. He has directed his team to take every step that they can to bring Brittney home. And so this is something he's been deeply engaged in. He's directed his team to do everything in their power to make this happen. But obviously, some of those specifics have to necessarily remain private in order for these things to work.
If it is a prisoner swap of this nature, I mean, there's a reason that the U.S. government says it won't negotiate with terrorists, and that's because it doesn't want to encourage terrorism and kidnapping of Americans around the world. The Russian government is not at the moment designated a terrorist organization, but isn't there a risk that if you trade somebody like Victor Bout for these two Americans, you're just encouraging other countries to take more Americans effectively hostage?
Well, again, I'm not going to comment on the specifics here because these are necessarily conversations and negotiations that need to happen in private. Again, I could reiterate what the Secretary of State said yesterday, which is simply that we have put a significant offer on the table. And I can also tell you what I've seen personally from the president, which is his engagement in this case, his directive to his team to do everything they can to bring Brittney and Paul home, as well as other wrongfully detained Americans around the world.
Hey, Kate, good morning. Jonathan Lemire. In just about an hour's time, at about 8:30, President Biden is going to be speaking to China's President Xi Jinping. And I was hoping you could preview two aspects of what is clearly a high-stakes phone call. First, what will the president's message be to China's ongoing refusal to condemn Russia's war effort in Ukraine? And second, what is the president going to say about House Speaker Pelosi's potential trip to Taiwan?
Well, as the president often says, he does not preview these conversations in public. These are direct leader-to-leader conversations. This is going to be the fifth time in his presidency that he's spoken directly with President Xi. He has a long relationship with President Xi, has known him back to the time when he was vice president. And he obviously believes very strongly in the value of leader-to-leader communication. So we'll have a readout after the call. I am obviously not going to get ahead of what the president is going to say directly to President Xi. You know, what I can say broadly, of course, is, you know, the president has worked to lead and rally the West and nations around the world in our response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We have induced significant costs on Russia, and obviously, as you saw from the president's travel to Europe over the last few months, he's been critical in ensuring that we're keeping our Western allies together on this. So beyond that, I'm not going to get ahead of what the president's going to say directly to President Xi, but we'll certainly have a readout after the call.
Well, also at 8:30, an important time today, we're going to get these GDP numbers, Kate.
A lot happening at 8:30.
Yeah, and stay tuned. Certainly, the White House has not been shy in recent days, trying to sort of get out ahead of these numbers, really pushing back against definitions of recessions and so on. Can you give us a sense as to what you're expecting to see today from those numbers and what this says about the state of the American economy?
Well, I mean, to be very clear, I haven't seen them. We'll see them at 8:30 like everyone else. So, you know, I can't speak specifically to what those numbers will be. What I can say is, you know, obviously GDP is one factor. But what we see across the economy is it's strong. You know, over the course of the second quarter, so the same period that this GDP number covers, for example, we've created over 1 million jobs. I mean, that doesn't feel like an economy in recession. We are at historic job growth. There's strong labor force participation. You see major banks and financial institutions saying that people have more money in their checking accounts than they did before the pandemic. And you also see them saying in their analyses that this does not look like or feel like an economy in recession. So, you know, I think what we've seen is the Biden economic agenda has created a historic number of jobs. It has continued to increase labor force participation, and the American people have more money in their pockets. So we'll see what the GDP number looks like, but I would say it's one piece of a broader economic forecast.
But as you know, Kate, people are getting crushed by inflation. So to a lot of people, it does feel like a recession, even if technically not. To a lot of small business owners who can't find anybody to work at their shop, it does feel that way. Part of it probably contributing to some of the numbers we've seen, including in a poll yesterday from CNN that showed 75% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning voters don't want the president to run for re-election. It's not the only poll that's shown something similar. How do you explain numbers like those, Kate?
Well, one thing I'd say is these polls also show that that Democrats and the American people choose President Biden in a head-to-head against Donald Trump if he were to run for president.
Right.
So there, I think what we've seen is the president has put forward an agenda that is building the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. He is ensuring that we reclaim our place on the world stage. He is committing to the things that he promised to do when he ran for president. And the other thing I'd say, you mentioned inflation. Of course, American families are focused on inflation. So is President Biden. It's why he's taken steps to try to bring gas prices down. It's why he's supporting the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which is going to lower healthcare costs and lower energy costs. So he is relentlessly focused on this, just as American families are. And he understands what they're going through, and he's doing everything in his power to bring prices down.
So with all that said, are you surprised when you see a number like that in the CNN poll that 3/4 of Democrats don't want the president to run again?
Look, I think polls go up and down, and it's understandable that at a time when people are feeling anxious about inflation, you would see some of that manifest in the polls. But again, what I would say is, Joe Biden won the presidency with 81 million votes in 2020. He is making good on the things that he promised to do. We saw enormous progress last night in this breakthrough in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act, and he's committed to doing the things that he said he would do when he ran. And I think that's what the American people are looking for, and he's continuing to do that every day.
White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield from the White House Force this morning. Kate, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.